Welcome to another serving of the Streamline Medieval Eldritch D&D campaign. This episode will be looking at the streamlined elements of the campaign. We'll be taking a look at ability scores. Now we're talking ability scores are essential to each character's creation. Talking about strength, dexterity, constitution, charisma, intelligence, and wisdom. Those would be the traditional 6. So what I prefer and what I use in my campaign is the traditional 3d6. Add in the 3 rolls of 1d6 for each score. If by chance the player may not be too crazy about his results, he can simply roll another set again. Take his pick. So I prefer the traditional 3d6 for each ability score. As you can see here, the average is from a 6 to a 15th. They have neither a penalty nor a bonus, but that does not mean that, for instance, a score of 14 would not reflect in the system how it is superior to a 13, but we'll get into a little bit later. The very minimum roll 3d6 score you can have is a 3, of course, which has a -3 penalty. So these are kind of the abysmal end of the spectrum. These low rolls have penalties. On the other hand, you have the rolls that have an adjustment, a bonus rather, for being so high, for 16 being a +1, for 17 being a +2, for 18 being a +3. The reason this is brought up is because older editions particularly had different adjustments, even when you had the same number. For instance, having a strength of 18 will give, like, say, a +3. But a dexterity of 18 may have a modifier of 4. So that inconsistency was cleaned up, I believe, by 3rd edition. So it makes more sense and it's easy to learn. Whenever you have a 16, you roll a 16, 18, you already know it's +1. It could be intelligence, strength, whatever. So that consistency helps a lot in simplifying the game. And you don't have to be looking anything back and forth. And another advantage to that is that in the middle of the game, particularly in the middle of the game, some sort of spell, some sort of curse could reduce your stats. Suddenly you go from a 16 to a 13, know exactly how your modifiers, your adjustments changes. And you go from a 16 to an 18 due to some spell, you already know that you're going to go from having a +1 bonus to a +3 bonus. So you don't even need to look at the book. I mean, it's just right off the bat. So it simplifies the game, and yet it still has the same consistency in terms of the concept of the character stats, the ability scores. Now, before we move any further, let's talk about dice. No, I'm not talking about that dice, talking about gaming dice. One thing that changed that I feel never really needed to change by the time of 3rd edition was, for some things you roll high to be successful, for other things you roll low. 3rd edition, for some reason, thought that was confusing, just made all rolls higher. The roller you score on a die roll, the higher the chance you get to success. And really, that's just something that they wanted to dumb down the game, which I didn't think it was necessary. I really think the company was overstating the intelligence of not just your average role-playing audience, but everybody who plays the game tends to be smart, bright people. So they'll eventually be able to know the difference between a high roll is good versus a low roll is good. Good example is saving throw has always been the higher the better. To hit has always been the higher the better. But in the old days, initiative, the lower the better. It's a good example of why. It's a good example of what I'm talking about. Now, having both rules like that, I mean, they have their whole logic if you really come to understand that it's really not necessary to turn it the other way and have them all be the higher the better. Once you understand the logic behind why a roll is higher better or why a roll is lower the better, it all really makes sense, and it's really just a no-brainer. And it totally fits with the concept of the old school campaign. Now, the higher the better makes pretty logical sense right off the bat without knowing anything about the game. You know, you roll 1d20 to hit an 18, looks good, and it's pretty intuitive. Now lower the better is a little bit more different, but once you understand the concept, you get it. So we use the concept, we have two different roles here. We have two different forms of rolling dice in the campaign, and I address them differently to avoid confusion in the text. Alright, dice rolls are what you normally think about rolling dice, and the higher the better. And then you have a dice check, which is the lower the better. Now, some of you old school guys may recognize the ability check, which is all it is, the lower the better. First of all, when you got to roll for your strength, so you got to make to see how you perform in something related to strength, where you roll your strength check. So if you have two characters and one has a strength of 13, the other has a strength of 15, the guy of 15 is going to have a higher chance of being successful because you got to roll under your strength, because the lower the better on the 1d20. And the guy with the 15 strength simply has a higher field of probability to cover. And so that game mechanic makes perfect sense in terms of a stronger character having a higher chance of doing something requiring physical strength with this roll than someone with a lower strength. So in this chance, and with this logic, the lower the better totally fits in. And again, it's an idea that didn't have to be meddled with, and it's just a simple idea that just works. So yeah, in the campaign, that's how it is done with dice rolls and dice checks. And I would add that one good thing I like from the new 5th edition rules that I did incorporate, I really like, is the concept of advantage and disadvantage. That's a very, very cool concept. And eliminates having to work with numbers in terms of the whole thing with dealing with numbers and penalties. Like the fact that for advantage, you roll 2 dice, and for advantage, you pick the better of the 2 dice rolls. And for disadvantage, as to being penalized, you pick the worst of two rolls that you make. And it suits a system where you have the two type of, when you have dice rolls and dice checks. It makes things a lot simpler in terms of if your bonus is a plus or if your bonus is a minus. That really simplifies the whole thing. I could avoid lots of confusion. So I think that's a really good concept that I assimilate into the game. So now we'll discuss each ability score and how it fits into this particular type of campaign. And so particularly like something like we say 1st edition, there were lots of modifiers and adjustments and special things you could do with each ability score. So I'm going to show how I streamline those to have a smoother running game. We begin taking a look at strength. Measure of the character's muscle mass, his physique. The classic, the main trait of the fighter. Warriors. Strength adjustments, that is a bonus for high strength or a penalty for low strength, will affect his attack rolls. Being with melee weapons or rather hand-to-hand. This reflects on his ability to control the weapon, since weapons have a certain weight, and a weaker character will tire easily and will not really be able to really maneuver the weapon as effectively. And adjustments will also affect the damage rolls. So a stronger character will hit harder than a weaker character. Now looking at the 1st edition stats, besides besides the attack rolls and damage roll adjustments, you also have weight allowance and open doors and bent bars, which is pretty much a percentage of how much you can lift and weight. So basically with these 3 stats, you can all resolve that with a strength check. If there's any doubt whether he can lift a heavy gate, pry open a stuck door, or if he can trust he can weight something, or see if you can lift a particular weight, you can simply resolve that with a strength check. It is good and easy. You don't need to write any additional stats. It's clean and straight to the point. And if you really need to penalize, you could always disadvantage him if case he's trying to do something particularly hard, or make him do a strength check, but as if his strength was half his normal score. And I said before, the higher the strength, the greater his chances are when he rolls the strength check. And as mentioned before, the higher the strength, the higher the probability of him being successful in making the roll and making the strength check.